Terry Colath. I'm here today with Professor Adrian Kerr, and our topic is Christopher Columbus. Professor Kerr is going to teach us about how Columbus almost did not discover America. Thank you for joining me, Professor Kerr.
Thank you, Terry. It's always a pleasure to come to Shell Point.
Well, this is something that just brings up a lot, Christopher Columbus. We celebrate him with a national holiday. We admire the fact that he wasn't afraid of falling off the edge of the world because he thought it was flat.
You heretic, you.
And we now find out that he almost didn't discover us.
It really, statistically, we should never have heard of Christopher Columbus. He would have been a Genoese crazy man who drowned on the way to China.
Interesting.
The history was that Marco Polo had followed the Silk Road to China because during the Mongolic period, trade between East and West exploded, between China on one hand and Europe on the other hand. So he was fascinated by China, so off he set for 16 years. And they arrested him and put him in prison because they suspected he was a spy trying to find this reason how silk was made. Because that was the great valuable item that the Chinese had traded on for thousands of years. So he was slung into prison, escaped, came back home and wrote his story. Who should buy the book but a sailor, Christopher Columbus from Genoa, and he was fascinated by China and an island off the coast of China called Sipangao, which was in fact Japan. And he said, wouldn't it be great if I could actually get there by going west rather than east? Because even in the 16th century and beyond, 15th century, the size of the Earth was approximately known. It was a sphere. No educated person thought the Earth was flat, and hadn't done for a millennium. So the ancient Egyptians had calculated the diameter of the Earth. The Greeks had calculated within 5%. So it was well known that it was a sphere, but how big was it? And how big were the oceans? And so he came up with the idea that you could leave Europe and travel west and you would get to China, and that is correct. What he got completely wrong was there wasn't just the Atlantic Ocean, there was a thing called the Pacific Ocean, which mariners will know is about twice the size of the Atlantic, which he had totally got wrong. All the expert cartographers at that time said, you'll never make it. You won't carry enough water or possessions, and your crew won't follow you for all that journey, and therefore we're not going to back you. So he went to England, he went to Portugal, he went to France, he went to Italy, and none of them would back him because the experts on navigation said, you'll never get there.
Because it's too far.
It's too far. You've underestimated the distance by a factor of 3 or 4. So eventually he just happened to be in Spain during the time of the Reconquista, when the Moors and the Jews were kicked out of Andalusia, and Christianity now ruled supreme in Portugal and Spain under the two united monarchies, Ferdinand and Isabel. And so he knocked on their door and they said, no, go away, you're crazy. Navigators say it's not going to work. But just in case some other country would give him the funding, they said, here, have a pension in this house. A few years later, he went back and said, at the time they had finished the conquest of Andalusia, they thought, well, Ferdinand particularly thought, he may just have a chance here, and if we can get to China, whereas the Portuguese were going around Africa to get to India and China, if we can go directly west, maybe that's a better route. So he said, you come up with half of the money, and we'll do the rest. So off he went to Italy, went to the Bank of the Mafia, and they gave him half the money, or lent him half the money. He went back and said, will you do the rest? And so they gave him 3 leaky ships, and off they set.
Leaky ships.
And the story I'm going to tell you is how he managed to very cleverly navigate across the Atlantic, and indeed he would never have made it because he accidentally bumped into a piece of land that nobody knew about called the Americas. And his folk on board were promised a journey of less than 30 days, and sure enough, when that time was up, they said, where is China? Fortunately, within a day and a half of him promising they were going to almost there, they discovered land in the Caribbean, which nobody knows exactly which land it was. But he found nothing there. apart from a few of the local Indians, who then he persuaded to come with him on the search for gold when he went on to Cuba, and then eventually came back with slaves and some exotic materials, but not much gold or silver, but had proven he could get to the Americas and back again.
Amazing. That is amazing. And we're going to hear the entire story.
Now, he was a great navigator and leader, but he was less good as a governor. And he was given the title Admiral of the Seas and a certain percentage of all the money he brought back. And he had 4 great journeys, but he wanted to be the governor of the New Indies. But he treated the Indios, the Indians, so badly that the reports went back to the king, and he was relieved of his duty, and he was actually brought back in shame and imprisoned. And Ferdinand, his supporter, King Ferdinand, gave him one more chance, because he, Columbus, still believed on his deathbed that he had not discovered a new world, he had discovered the outer edges of China. And so he said to Ferdinand, give me one more chance. I found all these islands, but I know if I can get across the land bridge, which we call Panama today, and we get across there, we'll find China. And he was technically correct, but a long, long way away.
Long way away.
But he couldn't cross the isthmus, the combination of insects and unfriendly Indians and revolts in his team. He never made it to the Pacific. It was a later explorer who crossed over and found the great Western Ocean, or the Pacific, we call it today.
Fascinating. Well, you will enjoy the story. Join Professor Adrienne Kerr Monday, October 8th.